obviously PFL's had a big year. You guys are working on a big pay-per-view coming up this fall, October
19th.
Francis Ngannou is back October 19th. Francis Ngannou is not just back to MMA, but he is going to make his PFL debut on pay-per-view for you guys. At what point did you get that commitment from Francis that he would definitely be a part of this event?
We talked to Francis in January, and Francis said, I'll commit to the winner of La Problemo versus Bader, called Champs v Champs, the PFL champion versus the Bellator champion. And he was sitting cage side. And he said, I'm going to have the most problem with La Problem. And then he knocked out Bader in 15 seconds. And Francis said, that guy's special. So he was engaged and down for that fight in January and February. Then Francis had a tragedy with his son. And Francis had a tough time in boxing. So his year took some twists and turns. And so we talked to him in early summer, and he said, I need a little bit more time. And then he came to us and said, I'll be ready in the fall. And so in late summer, we were able to schedule for the October 19th. And the Predator against the Problem. His 3-year return from MMA against the number 5 ESPN ranked 6'8" most athletic guy in MMA. So I think it's the fight of the year. That's finally on.
Now, just out of curiosity, and obviously, events played out the way they did, and of course, the tragedy that befell Francis Ngannou's family is just beyond measure as a father, especially. Was there hope in, let's say, that normal circumstances that the fight would have happened maybe sooner, potentially in like the summer or something? Or
no, I think this is excellent timing. I think you've got more interest in this fight than ever before. You've seen Dana White continuing his 10-year hype train on John Jones being the greatest of all time. That makes more people wonder about Francis. Francis hasn't fought since he resigned as the UFC heavyweight champion, and now he's back in MMA. On the other side, over the last year, you've seen La Problemo rise to number 5 in the ESPN rankings. And you've seen him have a devastating knockout like we haven't seen in the heavyweight division in several years over Ryan Bader. So I think you have both sides of the X versus Y rise in interest over 2024. So I think it's great timing. And as Shakespeare says, all's well that ends well. So I think this fight is coming in at a great time for fans.
So obviously this is, I would say it's easily the most anticipated fight, I think we can probably say, for PFL. You do have, who entered your organization as the #1 heavyweight in the world in mixed martial arts, has seen maybe not success in terms of win-losses in boxing, but he has certainly turned a lot of heads over in that sport, which really we're not expecting. His profile has only really gone up since you guys came to that agreement with him. Is the anticipation this will be PFL's most successful financially event in its history?
Well, I think there's several metrics to look at, that we always do as a company. It's certainly the biggest event we've ever put on. And don't forget the co-main fight is probably the biggest women's fight in MMA this year. Chris Cyborg, the greatest of all time, 4 promotion champion, and really only 1 loss in 16 years. Against the last and only person to beat Kayla Harrison, who is the most talked about fighter in UFC right now since she left PFL. Yet she lost to Larissa Pacheco and left PFL, didn't want to fight Larissa Pacheco again, didn't want to fight Chris Cyborg, and now you've got Chris Cyborg versus Larissa Pacheco. So I think you have the most interesting men's fight, and as a co-main, the most interesting women's fight. So first of all, I believe this is the biggest event possible in MMA because of the co-mains this year in 2024. And that makes it certainly the biggest thing for PFL. UFC is a bigger company, and we're putting on a bigger event. So this is a big deal for us. Our #1 metric is putting on the highest quality MMA fight for fans in the world. We want to show fans that we can put on as good or better a product for them than anyone in the world. That's metric #1. And metric number 2 is we want to do okay financially. We want to do okay financially. The cost of this fight is astronomical. Dana White talks about his 20 million Sphere event. This is more. Fighters here make more. The card here that will be announced has more big fights coming. This cost to us is more than his cost to the Sphere. So this is a gargantuan level event and our number one priority as fans.
So are you, just to be clear, you are saying that you're anticipating this event is going to be more costly than the figures that Dana White is throwing out there?
100%.
Okay. Now you're talking about pleasing fans, and that is the number one thing here. One thing you do hear a lot from fans, especially dedicated fans, is the desire for legally thrown elbows. Will we see that at this pay-per-view event? And there's no season to kind of get in the way, so I think people are kind of itching for that.
Yes.
Unequivocal yes. There we go.
Unequivocal yes.
Very
yes.
nice.
And also I encourage fans to continue to watch the evolution of PFL for surprises maybe in 2025 on that score.
Okay, that's interesting to know then. As far as, because I did want to actually a little bit more with Francis in particular. There's clearly, the fact, like we said, he kind of had a tougher year with boxing. Was there any concern that maybe he would set aside mixed martial arts even further to just continue on with the boxing? He has clearly found a lot of, especially financial success in that realm. So was there any worry that maybe things wouldn't come about where he could actually come back?
Zero worry. And I was asked about that at the time he fought Fury, and asked about that from you now and 100 times in between. For those who really know Francis Ngannou as a man, as a person, and what he's all about, he would have zero worry. The things he commits to, he commits to. The drive he has, he will accomplish. The commitments he has to himself, he will do. And that was why there was zero worry. We know what he's about, and we know what his goals are. And there was never any question what he would do for PFL and what his goals are in the sport of MMA. And that included continuing to compete in MMA and continuing to be a champion in MMA and continuing to show his level of what is possible to impact the sport even outside the cage of MMA, like PFL Africa, like showing the way for fighters to get more money if they test the market. So he has a lot of goals and a lot of drive about MMA that are both inside the cage and outside the cage.
Now, as far as, talking about getting more money for fighters and that kind of thing, Francis clearly is the A side of this fight. He would presumably be making a good amount of money relative to his opponent, but is there kind of a ballpark that Renan Ferreira can be expecting in his coffers after this fight?
Well, first of all, during this fight, what we said at the time and what Francis said at the time, he wanted his opponent to be guaranteed $1 million and have the opportunity to take $2 million. That's happening in this fight. So Ferreira's making 5 times what he used to make for this fight. We didn't have to do that. He was under contract. We did that because that's a commitment Francis made and we made for Francis's opponent. So he doesn't have to wait till after this fight. He's making it during this fight.
Okay. And obviously Francis, like we said, he did go through a personal tragedy, losing his little son, Kobe. I know you don't deal with him daily or anything like that. And I imagine a lot of things stick to the professional relationship between you two when it comes to this. But as a person, have you kind of gotten a read on where he feels mentally coming into this fight? Obviously still processing a terrible tragedy.
Now, my business partner, Pete Murray, is very close to Francis. And I do spend time with Francis. I don't want to share anything in confidence other than 2 things. He's a tremendous human being that I think people feel his authenticity when he talks. And 2, it was very, very painful. But part of that healing is getting back to life and getting back to having impact in the world in the way that you believe you can. And I think he's on that journey. He's ready for that. And I think this October 19th is a positive move forward. It's helpful for him in what was obviously a terrible, terrible, painful aspect that will never go away.
Of course. And I didn't want to actually get back to the other fight you mentioned Larissa Pacheco, Chris Cyborg, obviously a giant fight.
Love
It
it.
was a
Love it.
highly anticipated fight too. I think a lot of people were expecting this fight to have happened at the PFL versus Bellator event back in February. Is there any reason why this was so tricky to put together until now?
Yeah, and as kind of said earlier about Shakespeare, all's well that ends well. We tried to put several fights together at the time, which we discussed before, including Kayla at the time against Cyborg. We tried to do a lot on that Champs v. Champs card. The acquisition was so new. The Champs v. Champs happened so quickly. It just didn't happen. Sometimes things just don't happen despite everyone's best efforts. But I think the anticipation is more now. So I think it all worked out okay. But we all tried hard. The fighters tried hard. We tried hard. Schedules, timing, soonness just didn't happen. But it's on. And it's on. And it's, I think, bigger now than it was then. And more understood the level of stakes and how high a level these fighters are at right now than it might have been understood then.
Now, you and Chris have kind of had this interesting back and forth over the last couple of years, predating when Bellator was purchased. I see you smiling now. You, of course, know the twists and turns you guys have had. And I'm sure there's probably things that we don't even know about. But as far as kind of just the relationship you guys have, I mean, you characterize it as totally fine. She's actually at times said it really wasn't in a good place. Where would you say you guys are now, and do you think she would agree?
Every fighter at PFL, every employee, every partner knows that this company is everything to me. I'm a fighter just like them. The only difference is I'm fighting to build a company. And just like them, people tell me every day, you suck, you'll never be champion, you'll never succeed, you're not good enough. It's just on a different level. It's about a company. It's not inside the cage, it's outside the cage. I know exactly how they feel. I know exactly what they're going through. I do it every day for 7 years. So when people are here, they know how much I care. It's not a job. It's not even personal. It's everything. So when people get here, they know. And they know what I'm trying to accomplish for them. I'm trying to create opportunity for every fighter in the world. So you don't have to be under UFC's thumb. You're the center of this company. You create your own opportunity. None of us hold you back. You go as far as you can go. That's the company that I'm building. And when they're here, they get it. When they're not here, they're not part of this company. And I think that's been the whole difference.
So just to be clear, I mean, would you say that you guys are potentially on better terms now that you've had this time to, she's here, she's been here for a while now.
Yeah, I think more fighters.
Would you say so?
I think she'll get that a lot more a year from now than now. And she gets that a lot more today than a year ago. The more fighters who are here longer and the more fighters who get exposed to our company, they understand how hard we're fighting to build something for them. And you can talk to any fighter from A to Z, and they sense that, from a social media manager to a finance director to me. All of us are 90 hours a week, and all of us are flat out paying the price, just like they are. And so the more and more time that any fighter spends here, they appreciate that. And they really know we're all partners and we're all in the same trench.
Sure. Now, and of course, she's coming over, Cyborg is coming over from Bellator. I don't know, I know you've made the distinction that everyone is a PFL fighter at this point.
100%.
But there are still separate Bellator events run. There's PFL Europe, there's PFL Saudi, there's all of these different I don't want to say offshoots, but different brands, I guess. Is that a fair terminology?
Just think of them as different fight franchises, whether it's PFL Europe or, PFL League season, or October 19th is a PFL Super Fight, so they're just different franchises, but all fighters are part of PFL, and over time they'll fight on different franchises depending on what's great for them and what's great for the fan.
Sure. To get to my point, I just wanted to make sure I was clarifying the terminology that you guys go with. But as far as Bellator, we had a couple of events earlier this year. There was a bit of a break. And then September comes, and we have two events in quick succession. One of which was headlined, of course, by Usman Nurmagomedov, Alexander Shabliy, lightweight title fight. This was supposed to be the end of that lightweight Grand Prix Bellator was putting on. That was originally going to be for $1 million prize, but I understand that did not actually come to fruition. And that's my understanding of it. Is that correct? When the fight did happen, there was not $1 million up for grabs?
Right. You know, whole new company, whole new plans. And what we set out with Bellator was different from whatever they were doing before.
Okay. Now as far as the Bellator brand itself, the franchise itself, how do you feel, how would you feel the or assess the first half year, I guess we would really call it, has gone for you guys? Are you pleased with the results? Is it still a work in progress? Because this was a very new thing for you guys to kind of adopt that and implement it, right?
A new thing. And I would address it two ways. One, the product has been very successful. And there's been two parts that fans have told us they like a lot. And also the media feedback in terms of viewership has been very strong. One, 8 events, very curated, and they all have meaning. It's the Bellator Champion Series. You have 2 title fights and a #1 contender fight. So I know what to get on each product. So I'm getting actually the best fighters at PFL. Now, if you're top 10 ranked in the world, you're not in the PFL Global season. You're in this Champion Series. So it's truly the best of the best fighters in our company competing on either these title fights or the #1 contender fight. And you'll see more next year in terms of fighters being commingled if they're really champions and top of the world. So people have liked the curated events, and these top 3 fights really have top heavy loaded cards. So they're way better than a UFC fight, unless it's pay-per-view. The UFC pay-per-view is awesome, but the fight nights, watered down, and they've seen these as really better. So that's the first thing people have really liked. And the second thing they've really liked is tremendous increase in production value. The show is fantastic, what we do to the show. The thing that call it is still outstanding is people said, hey, the whole company's now PFL. I'm used to the brand being PFL. Should the brand be Bellator or PFL? So to me, the jury's still out on that, right? You know, what should the brand be on the Champion Series? We don't know. And I remember Ariel Helwani asking me the day we acquired it, what do you think is the future of the brand? And I said, separate the product from the brand for a minute. We're going to reimagine the product, and we have a lot of great vision on the product, but we're going to let fans in the market tell us. And we're going to test it for 1 or 2 years. And to be honest, we don't know the answers to that yet. We don't have enough data on the brand and how fans and everybody is responding to the brand. And there's still a little confusion on that. You know, how does Bellator fit in? And what does that mean to the PFL franchise of products? And we need more data.
Sure, and you know, I do want to go back to a point you kind of brought up. You initially, it was supposed to be 2 championship fights per Bellator event. That has not necessarily played out. Obviously, the Ireland event is short of a championship fight. You're amending it, I guess, a bit here, saying that, you know, top contender fight, which obviously still goes into what you're saying of it being a top heavy, top heavy card in that sense. But has that proved to be just kind of a bit trickier than, I guess, anticipated to be able to reach that goal of 2 championship fights per event?
Yeah, I think when you get to the end of the year, we have 2 events we haven't announced. We rescheduled, as you saw, Chicago this week for 2 much bigger events that will be announced. One will be announced for December and one will be announced for January, the last 2 events to end the 8 events. One of those has 3 title fights and one has 2. So I think when you get to the end of the year, due to scheduling, you want to have the right fights, and the right fights do sometimes move by a month or 2 to put together. So I believe when we look back on the 8 events, we would have had 15 title fights. So we'll be maybe 1 title fight short of the 2 times 8, but pretty darn close. So I think the product, check. I would give it a solid A-. I wouldn't give it an A yet. And the brand question still open.
Okay. I do want to go over to the season format before we wrap up here, because obviously it has been an interesting season, particularly in the new weight class that you guys added, the
Unbelievable.
Women's flyweight. Yeah, it kind of it almost manifested itself that you guys have potentially one of the biggest fights of PFL's year, let's say, outside of the pay-per-view and all these kind of things, right? But you have Tyler Santos coming over from the UFC, former champion, contender. And you have, of course, Dakota Ditcheva, who won Europe last year. And they've kind of been eyeballing each other this whole year.
Whole season.
They manifest the fight itself. And I mean, obviously you're smiling. You got to be happy about
Love
this.
it. Right. Look, sometimes, people ask us all the time, what if the underdog wins? What if this person wins? What if this person wins? We don't control the outcomes, right? The winner loses, they're done. Winner wins, they advance. They win 3 times, they're in the finals. Okay. So, but sometimes you get a dream matchup. Like sometimes people love if the Yankees play the Dodgers in the World Series. Sometimes you get that. The Celtics play the Lakers in the NBA Finals. That's what this is. So of course we love that this happened. It's fantastic. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Dakota's not favorite when the odds are going to come out, and yet she's 10-0, and she's hotter than hot in MMA circles. But she's not going to be favored. She doesn't have enough experience to be favored in that fight. So I just love it because I love things that fans are going to love. I love things that are going to raise the profile of the company. I love things that are going to be unknown. And I think that's one of those fights.
Sure, sure. I mean, obviously the enthusiasm is there on your end, and I think there probably is at least some from fans as well. But would you say that this is possibly a lead contender to anchor that card, to be that kind of final championship fight on the event?
I think it could be one of the last 2 for sure. How will it shake out? I'll let our team work through the media details, but it's certainly one of the last 2 fights, no question. It's that good.
Sure. And now, obviously, that has traditionally been, at least in recent years, a pay-per-view event as well. This would come just a month after your previous pay-per-view event. Is this going to be pay-per-view, or will this be free air?
Great news, fans. Free, global, entire event, not pay-per-view. PFL World Championship.
Okay.
It's coming to you in 170 countries on the media partner that you've watched the regular season and the playoffs. So in whatever country you've watched PFL, the first 9 events, you're getting the championship this year.
Interesting.
Big, exciting news. Yep.
Now there's still no plans to allow the elbows in the championship event, right? I know you've given the analogy before the World Series, but has there been any thought on that?
There has been thought on that, and stay tuned. I wouldn't be definitive that it's not happening. Stay tuned. Okay. I've often said we've led in many, many innovations, and we don't want to be right. We want to win. And what is the right answer in super fights? What is the right answer in championship ending events? We're reevaluating that now. And I would pay close attention to future announcements.
Okay. Last question I have for you is, we don't know where this event is going to be. Maybe you're not going to reveal that just yet. I'm not sure if you're quite ready for that one.
I've told you so much already. You're.
I know. That's why I feel like I'm almost begging you.
Yeah, you're rolling.
Going up too much here, right?
Yeah.
But I have to ask. We haven't seen it in New York this season. Is New York in the running at the very least for this event?
It is not. Okay. What I will say is it's called the PFL World Championship. And it's been in the United States 5 years in a row. And this year, the World Championship will be outside the United States. And we've made a concerted effort to alternate between the United States and outside the United States. And we're now going to try to put that into play if we can going forward. With the launch of PFL Europe, PFL Africa, PFL Mideast, and coming LATAM and Australia, we want to take the championship every other year outside of the United States. And we're working to try to finalize this to be the first year. Not done yet. Can't say definitively, but that's our priority if we can, to US, rest of the world, US, rest of the world for the World Championship.